Hello and welcome to the podcast According to Sci-Faith, where we discuss topics revolving around the compatibility of science and faith. I'm Joshua Göcking and you're listening to According to Sci-Faith. Episode 61. Multiverse, Hidden Variables, or Random Chance. This is an article I wrote for the Studium Integrale Journal from the Studiengemeinschaft Wort and Wissen, which is a society in Germany where we argue about science and faith and how a biblical worldview can still be in line with scientific findings, and also where scientific findings deviate from the faith. We discuss it. We discuss how we can interpret these results in such a way that science is still in agreement with the statements of the Bible. So it's pretty interesting discussions, pretty interesting things, mainly focused, of course, on evolution and creationistic theories, but there's also space for physics, and this is the part where I engage with them, and I was able to write an article about my findings, or about what I have become to know in physics, and also to what I talk about in my book Sci-Faith, the compatibility of science and faith, about theories and worldviews. And I was allowed to write an article there, and this was released last year in May. And by now I was also able to translate it into English, and it is now available on my blog. So yeah, there you can read the whole article in English. And today in this episode, I will not read through the whole article, but I will read through the abstract and will shortly discuss the ideas that are behind it, so that you get an idea of what the article is about. And I really encourage you afterwards to open it up after you listen to this episode, open it up, the article, and read it completely through, because then you really get to grasp the whole content, the whole ideas. And I think it's really encouraging, especially as a reader who tries to maneuver the topic of science and faith and how they can be compatible. And this is all, as you might have already, if you're familiar with some of my content, you notice that I always put this in relation to quantum mechanics, because there you really can see this play out. So let's go through this abstract, and I will every one or two sentences or every paragraph I will make a short stop and discuss what this is about, say more to it, and explain a little bit of what I mean by the sentences I made. So let's start. The double-slit experiment shows that quantum objects have both wave and particle properties, wave-particle duality. So this is the main thing of quantum mechanics, that it has this weird feature that particles or the quantum objects on a microscopic level seem to have both a wave nature and a particle nature. And this is really odd, because wave and particles are really completely different concepts. In addition to the type of measurement, has an influence on the outcome of the experiment measurement problem. So the type of the measurement you do has an influence on how the outcome of the experiment will be, which is really odd, because usually in science you say what I do, or I'm as the observer, I'm not related to the experiment. I'm not part of the experiment. I'm like an external observer, so it should not affect the experiment in an ideal way. And in quantum mechanics, this is not the case. You have this measurement problem, which basically states that if you observe a state, then this will influence or affect the outcome of the experiment. Mathematically, the observations can be described using various approaches. For example, the Schrödinger picture, the Heisenberg picture, and the Feynman's path integral formulation. So this is from mathematics. There are certain ways to describe this behavior. So if you have new phenomena in physics occurring, the first thing physicists do is to try to describe it, and to describe it they use math. So you can really, often it is said, math is the language of physics, and this is really true. We formulate or we express something about physics in mathematics, in mathematical language. Of course, if you hear a physicist talking, he does not only speak in equations, he also uses English or German or wherever you are language. If it's an international society, then they use English. So in their papers they also always write in English, but they also speak in equations, and the physics itself is mostly or completely formulated in equations and mathematical equations. So it's really the language of science, which I think you need to understand especially if you are this is slightly distracting from the point, but I think it's important to understand it, that if you are dealing with scientific facts, especially with physics, and you don't look at any equations and only at the explanations, or for example in explanations in popular science books and so on, you always need to take this with a grain of salt, because the real language physics is formulated in is maths. And if you deviate from this by trying to explain the maths in English language or in another language, then there's also something you lose, some information that gets lost, and then it can happen that there is some knowledge lost and that you come to false conclusions if you only go from that. But okay, that's just a side note, just that you know that if you really want to grasp all of physics, unfortunately for some people, you really have to grasp the maths behind it. Okay, but let's continue. Or one more thing to this, because this sentence is actually saying that there are certain pictures or certain mathematical descriptions of quantum mechanics. So what they did, the first physicists who came who were introduced to quantum mechanics, they found a mathematical description of what actually goes on there. So by this, you have not really understood yet what physically happens, but you have a description of it in physics. So you can say, okay, using this mathematical formulation, I can describe what's happening physically. And those were the pictures they used, the Schrödinger picture, the Heisenberg picture, and then there's also Feynman's path integral formulation. So the Schrödinger picture is described later, and let me just say the Feynman path integral formulation is also very interesting because it's also very but I recommend you to read the article there. I shortly describe it, and then you can see what's the interesting part about it. I think I also did some podcast episodes or wrote some articles about it, but if you want to have more information for this, then just let me know, and then maybe I can produce a podcast episode specifically on that topic. All right, I think it's time for a short break. So before we continue, just make me some short announcements. If you want to know more about Sci-Faith, I really encourage you to go to my website, sci-faith.de/en. There you can find out more about this podcast, about my book, and about my blog. So you can read my blog. All the articles are also now in English, so you can read all of them. Also the article which I described in the first episode. And you can also learn more about my book, which is now available in English. So I really encourage you to get it as an ebook and read it, because there really much about what we are talking about is really discussed in a deeper way, and you will understand, I think, a lot more of what I'm talking about if you really have grasped those concepts. Also, there is a new book out, my latest novel, or my first novel also, Alien Thoughts. You can get it on Amazon as an ebook, and I really encourage you to read it. It's really exciting. I have gotten a lot of feedbacks. People really like it, and so I really hope you read it and also give it a 5-star rating, because this always helps people to to know what a book is, to understand if it is something for them. And really, if you have the time, I really ask you to write a review of it, such that people really can know what a book is about, know if it's something for them, and so more readers can get aware of this book and can get to enjoy it. It also, of course, all this also supports me in my work, also on this podcast. It gives me more flexibility to produce new episodes. So I really am hoping for your support. Also, if you have ideas or requests or something that you want to have covered in this podcast, feel free to contact me at sci-faith.de/en and then use the contact form. There you can also subscribe to the newsletter, where you will get some special materials. So in the newsletter I write some of the thoughts that are usually not fit for blog posts, but still very interesting topics. So if you want to get this or get news, what happens at Sci-Faith, what's new, what's up, then you will get the latest news. You will really get there, and then I really encourage you to subscribe to my Substack. With that being said, let's continue to the episode. Okay, let's continue. According to the Schrödinger picture, the quantum objects are in a superposition of several states and are only fixed to one state by the measurement. So this is what the Schrödinger picture tells you. It says that there are every state that a particle or the quantum object can be in are with some probability they are taken, and they are only fixed once you make a measurement. So before you make a measurement, you cannot say in which state the particle is. The probability with which they are measured in a given state can be determined from Schrödinger's wave equation. So this is the equation that is given. I think many of you might have heard of it, Schrödinger's wave equation or the Schrödinger equation, which gives you this wave equation, which basically gives you the probability to find a particle in a specific state. For example, to find a particle at a specific place at a certain time. And continuing, the interpretation of this equation is the subject of controversial debate, and it has been shown that they can be interpreted in different ways. So as we said before, there we have the mathematical description. There we also already have three descriptions. Maybe there are more, but we know specifically of these three that can describe all of quantum mechanics mathematically. And there's no controversial debate about which is the proper one, because everyone knows, okay, you can use that one, you can use that one, and some fit better for this for one purpose, and some fit better for another purpose. For example, in pure quantum mechanics, you usually use the Schrödinger or the Heisenberg picture. So usually it's the Schrödinger picture. The Heisenberg picture, or a combination of Schrödinger and Heisenberg picture, is used usually if you have interactions in place. And once you go deeper down the rabbit hole, so to speak, once you go down to quantum field theory, where you also put in relativistic effects, there at some place the Feynman path integral is pretty useful, and there you use also this approach. So it's just a matter of which is more convenient for solving the equations you want to solve. So there's no controversial debate about now this is the right or this is the wrong. It's just different tools that can be used for and that are more convenient in one way or less convenient in another. But then there's a different point of interpreting these results. So really saying what does happen on a physical level. So you move yourself away to some degree from the mathematical description and really try to understand on a philosophical level what happens on a subatomic level. What does it mean that I cannot say in which state a particle is unless I measure it? And before, there is no way of telling. Not only no way of measuring, but no way of telling. There's no consistent way of speaking of a particle in a certain state if it is not measured in that state. So this is there really is controversial debate about what this means, and also what it means that I can only give a probability of finding a particle in a certain state. What does it mean that it is not determined, that it is not determined from its initial conditions in which state it will be? And there are certain interpretations, and in the continuation of the article, I talk about this. So let's continue with the abstract. The most common is the Copenhagen interpretation, which state that nature actually behaves in this way. The measurement problem therefore shows the limit of what science can describe. So this was the first interpretation people came up with, for example, Heisenberg and Niels Bohr, and they initially formulated it, and what it basically really says is, okay, this randomness, this random part of is a part of physics, is just the way the world works. It's just this way, and nature behaves this way, and it shows us that there is a limit in science. It's we cannot go beyond the limit of this randomness of nature, so to speak. And this is very popular, mostly due to the reason that you, not due to philosophical reasons, many or most physicists I have met would disagree on a philosophical level and would say, no, that's not how I really deep down in myself think that nature works. But it is popular because it allows you to say, okay, let's close the topic. Nature behaves that way. It doesn't make any good to speculate around and around instead of solving the equations we have at hand. So it's a pragmatic approach. It's pragmatically saying, okay, we just say it is like that. We cannot prefer one interpretation over another because there's no way to scientifically prove them, at least now. And so we just say, we just use this Copenhagen interpretation and we continue calculating. So as one physicist once said it, shut up and calculate. So this is the idea behind it. So stop thinking about all the philosophy behind it, just calculate. But then there are many other interpretations which, if you talk to people what they think philosophical about this topic, where they say, no, the Copenhagen interpretation, I don't believe that, where they go more in these directions. And there's, for example, or let's continue in the abstract there, I name one of them. The de Broglie-Bohm theory assumes that there are additional hidden variables that determine the state of the particles. These move on a pilot wave given by the Schrödinger equation. So this is a pretty popular one. In general, there's a whole class of hidden variable theories. Albert Einstein was also one of those who was really thinking about these theories, or who preferred those to classical quantum mechanics. And there are many people who are inclined to believe these theories. There's a problem with hidden variables theories because there are inequalities that have to be met if there are local hidden variables. And Bell, a mathematician in the 60s, could show that these inequalities need to be fulfilled. And then it could be experimentally shown that these inequalities are not fulfilled in quantum mechanics. So the hidden variables theories, they are very restricted in how they can be applied. But the de Broglie-Bohm theory is one that is formulated such that it does not run into these issues, and therefore it is valid in that sense. But still, it is you need to assume that there are no local hidden variables, which makes it a little bit harder to believe for some, I guess. And then there's also another very popular one. So let's continue in the abstract. In the many worlds theory, every state is assumed after a measurement, only not in the same universe. Each measurement here requires the creation of many new worlds in which one of the possible states is assumed. So each of the possible states a particle or a quantum object can be in is obtained in this interpretation, which would be ridiculous if you only had one world, because then every time you say I measure something, you would measure everything. That doesn't make sense, and that is not what we experience. So for this to make sense, it needs to be that we measure one thing in this world, but all the other states are measured in different worlds. And there we have many worlds, that hence the name many worlds theory. So this leads us to ideas of a multiverse and all this stuff where we say, okay, there are many worlds out there, worlds where I'm a rich, famous guy and so on. So all this kind of stuff. And I think this is also one reason why it is really popular, that oneself is or that there are many copies of our world where we have made completely different decisions and completely different outcomes and so on and so on. And I really discuss also the problems in my side, the problems, especially philosophically, with this worldview and also what's behind it, because as you might have noticed, the Broglie-Bohm theory and also the many worlds theory, what they do is basically they use quantum mechanics to come back to a deterministic worldview where you don't have this indeterminism of quantum mechanics, meaning the fact that everything depends on probabilities, that you can only give probabilities for a certain outcome and that nothing is determined by their initial conditions. And with these alternative interpretations, you get this back. You get determinism back, not in such a way that we can say foretell the future since we know the outcome of every measurement, not in this way, but in a general philosophical way that we know everything is determined, although we cannot determine it ourselves. But still, the philosophical component of everything being determined is preserved by this. And you can also see, if you look into the worldview of many who propose these theories, you can see that this is a worldview they hold on to, that they, many of them also believe, for example, do not believe in free will, since they believe that we are just material beings and that everything that happens is just electrons and neurons firing in our heads and so on. And so everything that happens is completely determined. So if you make a decision for one thing or another thing, that's not your free will making this decision. It just appears to you this way. And actually, it's just the way the world works and you are just part of a huge machine. And people who hold this worldview usually also prefer deterministic theories or interpretations of quantum mechanics. Okay, with that, let's continue. Despite their differences, all these interpretations can conclusively explain the double-slit experiment. So this is what all these interpretations have in common. They can all describe the data of quantum mechanics. They can all make the same statements, the same conclusions, and so on. And this is this is the good thing and also the bad thing, because it means they can all be true, but it also means they cannot be false. There is no way of verifying or falsifying which of them is true and which of them is don't true. So we have to allow all of them. And there's therefore a plenitude of interpretations of quantum mechanics that you can have. So if you want to do this exercise, you can just go to, for example, Wikipedia and type in interpretations of quantum mechanics. And there's a huge article with different kinds of interpretations, and the list Wikipedia offers is not even complete, I think. So everyone can have their own interpretation of quantum mechanics. And if you look among scientists, many of them have. So there are multiple different interpretations, and you cannot tell which one is right, which one is wrong, unless you really find a mistake in one of those interpretations where it really contradicts the scientific data. But there are a plenitude of different interpretations for this that you can have and that you cannot rule out by scientific means. And this is also something in this article. So in this article, it's not so much about interpretations of quantum mechanics itself, but I use this as an analogy for something greater, or for something regarding theories in general. And this is in the last sentence of the abstract. I lead to that. And there I say, similarly, many natural phenomena can also be explained by both naturalistic evolution as well as supernatural creation. So this is the statement that I make, that I say as you have these many different interpretations of quantum mechanics, who are all different, who make all different statements, who even in their basic concept, in their basic philosophy, can be completely different from deterministic to completely indeterministic. So in the same way that you have that, you can have for a general theory, like the theory of quantum mechanics, the theory of gravitation, the theory of also not physical, not physics theories, but maybe biological theories, like the theory of evolution. But if you want to go back to physics, like the theory of the Big Bang, and so on, you can have also different kinds of interpretations. The data is firm. The data is fixed. As far as their errors go, the data is fixed, but the interpretation of this data, there are different or can be an alternative interpretation that describe the same data in the same way, but yield different interpretations, different philosophical contexts. And in this way, you can describe, for example, it should be in principle possible to describe the findings of biology, the findings of fossils, and the things it should be possible to describe them in terms of an evolutionary theory, as science does today, or as is established in science. But it should also, in the same way, be possible to describe it through theories of supernatural creation. Or if we go back to the Big Bang, we can describe the Big Bang using the theories we have right now. We will go into some of it in a later episode, where we go about the Big Bang and the expansion of the universe, and then the inflationary period, and so on. We can describe it in this way, with its 13 billion years of expansion and so on. This can describe it in this way, but we can also find a description of it which is more in a supernatural creational way, which also describes exactly the same data. So this was the abstract to the article I wrote. So if it catched your interest, I really recommend it to you. So go to scifaith.substack.com, and there you can read the article in full. So that's everything for today's episode. I hope you liked it and you enjoyed each part of it. If you want to get in touch with me or discuss a topic or want to give me some feedback, then feel free to contact me using the contact form on my website, sci-faith.de/en. And there you can go to the contact tab and contact me. And if you have any other things or episodes you want to have covered there, or topics you want to have covered, feel free to contact me there. Also, if you are not yet familiar with the format in which this podcast is produced, let me just briefly explain it to you. So there is always at the beginning of a month or of a block, there is a big block of 4 episodes in one thing. It's kind of like a preview, which I call it, where you have the next 4 episodes all in one episode together, combined. And this is for people who like to hear long format podcasts, who have a long way to work or something else, where they can listen to a long episode and can then have a preview of the next 4 episodes all at once, and are completely up to date from the beginning of the block. For those who like their episodes shorter, who prefer it if they have a half an hour or even less of a podcast episode, for those there is every week afterwards will appear a podcast episode almost in that length, and this way I can publish every week a new podcast every episode, and everyone can have it his own way, either once a month a long chunk of content, or once a week a shorter format podcast episode. So I think that's the best way for everyone, and also for me when I'm producing it. Please also note that this is an independent podcast, which means that it is recorded, produced, and marketed by me. So I really need your support in this. So if you like this podcast, then give it a 5-star rating. And if you have the time, even write a review to it. This just helps other listeners to become aware of this podcast, and then people who might be interested in this content can become aware of it. Also, if you have friends who you think would like this content, then recommend it to them and share it with them. Also, you can support me in other ways, for example, by reading my blog and subscribing to my newsletter, or even by reading my books, which you can find on Amazon. For example, there is my latest novel out now is Alien Thoughts, which is pretty entertaining from the feedback that I gotten, and so it's also in some way related to science and faith. The topic of it is also in there, but of course you can also read the book to this podcast, Sci-Faith, The Compatibility of Science and Faith, which is also available in English since last year. Thank you for that, and now I wish you a wonderful day, and I'm looking forward for you to tune in again next time.